Imagine heading out to the barn on a warm afternoon, expecting just a quiet lunch with your spouse, only to stumble onto something that shatters your world. That's exactly what happened to me. When I went looking for Clara, my wife, I found her with someone else, right there in our own barn. In a rush of betrayal and anger, I thought I had all the answers. But what started as a simple betrayal unraveled into a tangled web of deception that went deeper than I could have imagined. This journey showed me truths about loyalty, trust, and the delicate threads that hold a relationship together. You won't believe the twist at the end. It was one of those blazing hot afternoons, with the sun holding its place high in a cloudless sky. Clara and I had planned a quiet lunch on the porch, a cherished break from the daily routines that always kept us on our toes. These moments had become something of a ritual, a cherished pause where we could laugh, share, and savor the satisfaction that comes with a life on the farm. I'd grown to appreciate these times together, feeling that unique connection with her, as though nothing could come between us. Maybe it was wishful thinking, but I truly believed we were solid. As I waited, I couldn't help but think about how easy it was to overlook these moments amid all our responsibilities. Today, I wanted our lunch to be special, so I decided to find Clara myself, eager to get back to that familiar, comforting rhythm. The setting felt perfect. The soft rustle of the breeze, the faint earthy scent of the fields, and even the horses trotting in the distance, all painting a picturesque scene. Our farm was more than just land. It was our dream come to life, a source of deep satisfaction. Little did I know, this seemingly simple plan would lead to an afternoon that would alter everything I trusted. I decided to check the barn, one of her favorite spots on the farm. The quiet around me was soothing, broken only by distant animal sounds and the occasional whisper of wind. As I got closer, I noticed faint sounds drifting down from the loft, muffled laughter and soft voices. At first, I thought it might be one of the workers taking a break, sharing a harmless chat. But something in that moment didn't sit right, a feeling I couldn't quite shake. That slight discomfort led me to climb the loft stairs, unknowingly stepping into a discovery I would have never imagined. As I reached the top of the stairs, the scene that unfolded before me hit like a punch to the gut. There, in the hazy light filtering through the barn's wooden slats, was Clara, in close conversation with Tom, one of the seasonal workers. They didn't notice me at first, lost in a whisper that felt far too familiar. My pulse quickened, and a sense of betrayal washed over me, a feeling too strong to ignore, even if I wanted to. All I'd expected was a simple lunch, but here was something so completely out of place it felt like a bad dream. I felt rooted to the spot, unable to look away. They suddenly noticed my presence, and the shock on Clara's face was unmistakable. She stammered, trying to explain, but the scene had already painted a vivid picture in my mind. Tom, on the other hand, looked caught between regret and guilt, though he avoided my gaze. My heart pounded, torn between anger and disbelief. How could something like this happen, right under my nose? This wasn't the stimulating life I thought we shared. It felt like everything I'd held as true had somehow unraveled before me. My mind spun with emotions, each one building on the next. Every step away from that loft was heavy with realization, and the once welcoming warmth of the farm now felt tainted. I had no intention of letting this moment pass without answers. My emotions were a chaotic mix of hurt and fury, swirling too fast for me to make sense of it all. Yet, deep down, the need for an explanation gnawed at me, pushing me forward even as I wanted to retreat. The satisfaction I'd once felt here was replaced by an intensity one could hardly describe, an urge for confrontation, for truth, no matter how painful it would be. Standing there, anger swelling inside me, I couldn't hold back any longer. I looked Clara straight in the eye, demanding an explanation, my voice harsher than I intended. She began to speak, her words tumbling over each other as she tried to justify what I'd seen. But each excuse only fueled my anger. It felt like a betrayal of everything we'd built, all the intentions we'd shared. Tom, too, attempted to apologize, stammering that it was a mistake. Yet each word sounded hollow, leaving me with a deep sense of disrespect and frustration. They both seemed so far removed from the people I thought I knew. I could hardly believe the situation was even real. Clara's face reflected a mixture of shame and defiance, but I couldn't find it in me to understand her side. My mind kept replaying the scene in the loft. Each detail burned into my memory, impossible to shake. Tom's presence only amplified my frustration. His feeble attempt to apologize grated on me, as though he didn't grasp the depth of what he'd done. The barn, once a place of satisfaction and shared dreams, now felt claustrophobic, as though the very air was heavy with betrayal and broken trust. Turning to leave, I was overcome with a feeling of powerlessness and a simmering need for some kind of justice. I wasn't one to let things go easily, especially not something that had shaken me to my core. A plan began to form in the back of my mind, one that would make both of them feel the sting of this betrayal. I had no intention of letting them off easily. The satisfaction of a quiet resolution was no longer an option. I wanted them to understand the full weight of their actions, and I would make sure they did. Once I left the barn, a cold determination settled over me. Every moment of betrayal replayed in my mind, and the idea of letting this slide felt impossible. If Clara and Tom had gone behind my back, they needed to understand the weight of their actions. I didn't want a heated argument or an emotional plea. I wanted a carefully crafted response that would strike exactly where it hurt most. My intentions were crystal clear, and the plan started forming. A slow, deliberate way to make them face the full depth of their betrayal. I couldn't do this alone, so I confided in May, my sister. Her shock mirrored my own, but unlike me, she was quick to rally, her support steady and unwavering. Together, we decided on a calculated approach. I would keep things civil on the surface while gathering everything I could to expose any deceit Tom might be hiding. May had always had a sharp eye, and with her insight and the help of Hank, another loyal worker, I knew we could uncover anything Tom had buried. This was more than just satisfying a need for revenge. It was about reclaiming control and righting the wrongs in my own home. Hank and I worked together, setting up cameras and checking the farm's finances for any hint of misconduct. With every step, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and tension, fueled by the possibility that Tom's betrayal could go even deeper. But I was ready for it. Clara and Tom had taken something precious, and if they thought they'd get away unscathed, they were sorely mistaken. This wasn't just a fight for trust. It was a fight for respect, for every intention I'd put into building a life with Clara. As the days passed, my resolve only grew stronger. With Hank's help, we installed hidden cameras around the main barn and office, watching Tom's every move closely. Each night, I reviewed the footage, searching for signs that would confirm my suspicions. Before long, we found it, the evidence that proved he was skimming money from the farm's accounts, cleverly hiding small sums here and there. The discovery was both a punch to the gut and a strange relief. My intuition hadn't failed me. There was more to his betrayal than I'd first realized. Confronting Tom this time, I felt a surge of satisfaction, like a piece of justice was finally falling into place. I laid out the evidence in front of him. Bank statements, videos, receipts, all unmistakable proof of his deceit. His face shifted from shock to regret, but I wasn't interested in apologies anymore. Demanding the stolen money be returned, I watched him squirm, his attempts at explaining himself falling flat. The betrayal I'd initially felt over Clara had now extended to a level of disrespect I couldn't ignore. This wasn't just personal. It was a matter of integrity, both his and mine. Tom was immediately dismissed, ordered off the farm with clear instructions to settle his debt. But the damage he'd caused felt bigger than the money. He'd taken advantage of our trust, our good intentions, and it stung deeply. As I walked away, a strange calm settled over me, knowing he was gone, but aware that this wasn't over. Clara's role in all this still lingered unanswered, a question that pulled me toward the confrontation I knew I couldn't avoid. After dealing with Tom, I knew it was finally time to confront Clara head-on. I found her alone, looking as though she'd been waiting for this talk as much as I had. With every question I asked, she seemed to brace herself, her face showing a mix of shame and sincerity. She didn't dodge the truth. Instead, she admitted to her mistakes, offering a genuine apology that I could almost feel. But it wasn't enough. Not after everything I'd seen. My trust had been shattered, and the sincerity in her voice was barely enough to scratch the surface. Clara pleaded with me to listen, explaining how loneliness and resentment had blurred her judgment, but her words fell on a heart too bruised to fully hear her out. Her apology stirred emotions I thought I'd shut down, yet the satisfaction of a clean break felt oddly tempting. I told her I needed time to think and asked her to stay with May for a while. She hesitated, as though hoping I'd change my mind, but in the end, she agreed. I could see the hurt in her eyes, but this time, I had to protect my own peace. As she gathered her things, I felt a strange emptiness where our bond used to be, replaced by a void that wasn't easily filled. I'd held on to a life built around trust and intention, yet here I was, facing the reality that it could all be stripped away in an instant. I watched her leave, my heart conflicted, unsure if I'd ever truly forgive her. And as she walked away, I knew this chapter wasn't quite over, leaving an unsettled feeling that only time, and perhaps more truth, could resolve. Just as Clara was about to leave, she turned to face me one last time, holding a folder I hadn't noticed before. She said she needed me to see something, that this story wasn't as simple as it seemed. Inside were documents, emails, financial records, notes from weeks past, all tracing back to Tom's schemes. She explained that she had confronted Tom about suspicious account activity the day I'd found them in the barn. That moment, which I'd seen as betrayal, had actually been her attempt to get answers, to protect what we'd built. I felt the weight of her words, a mix of doubt and surprise building. She tried to explain everything sooner, but I'd been too overwhelmed to listen. The proof in front of me was undeniable, revealing not only Tom's theft but a plan to cover his tracks by casting doubt on Clara herself. He'd carefully orchestrated this, manipulating our emotions, our intentions, until he was caught. As I read through the pages, my anger began to shift, replaced by a deep and uncomfortable guilt. Clara had been trying to shield our farm, our lives, and I hadn't seen it. I'd let my own hurt blind me to her truth. Standing there, I struggled to process everything, feeling the sharp sting of regret. Clara's face held no resentment, only sadness and a hint of relief. She carried this burden alone, knowing I might never believe her. Yet here she was, offering the truth regardless. She left without asking for anything, only hoping I'd understand. Watching her go, I felt a pang of shame, realizing that my own intentions had nearly driven away the one person who truly cared about protecting us both. After Clara left, May and Hank stepped in, determined to help me uncover the full extent of Tom's betrayal. They brought forward evidence I hadn't seen before. A recording of Tom bragging to another worker, boasting about how he'd manipulated us all. He laughed, detailing exactly how he'd sown seeds of doubt between Clara and me, making sure I'd find them together that day in the loft. Listening to his words made my stomach churn. He'd seen our trust as something to be exploited, a weakness he could twist to his advantage. My anger surged, but this time it was mixed with guilt for doubting Clara. Seeing it all in black and white, the pieces finally began to fit. I had been so focused on the betrayal, I thought I'd seen that I'd missed what was right in front of me. May, who had always been straightforward, looked at me with a hint of frustration, but mostly understanding. She and Hank had noticed things about Tom's behavior that I'd ignored, too blinded by my own assumptions. With every piece of evidence they revealed, it became painfully clear how much damage his schemes had caused. Damage that had gone far beyond finances and straight to the heart of my marriage. As the weight of everything settled, I was left feeling hollow, confronted by the reality of my own misjudgment. Tom had managed to use every intention I had to twist our lives, to tear apart what I valued most. My mind raced with regret and disappointment, realizing that the satisfaction I'd felt when I'd confronted Clara had been based on lies. And now, even with the truth in hand, The cost of my doubt felt like a wound that wouldn't easily heal. The next morning, Clara came by to collect the last of her things. We didn't speak much. There wasn't much left to say. I watched as she moved through the house, each step a quiet reminder of all we'd once shared. We both knew that despite the truth coming to light, something precious between us had been damaged. Standing by her car, I felt a bittersweet mix of emotions, a lingering love, an aching regret, and the quiet acceptance that, for now, some wounds needed time apart to heal. She looked at me one last time, her eyes soft but guarded, and said she understood why things had happened the way they did. I wanted to say something meaningful, something that could bridge the gap between us, but the words never came. In her gaze, I saw her own pain, her own sense of betrayal, not from infidelity, but from the trust that had been lost. She left with a quiet grace, leaving me with the realization that the satisfaction of clarity came at a high cost, one that would take time for either of us to fully understand. As I stood alone, the farm around me felt different, emptier somehow. The life I'd built, the intentions I'd held on to, felt fragile in a way I hadn't expected. Yet, amid the regret, there was a faint glimmer of hope. Perhaps with time, I could rebuild what had been broken, finding healing not just for the farm, but for myself as well. For now, though, all I could do was face each day one at a time, letting the quiet rhythm of the land guide me toward a sense of peace.
Keep watching our stories by clicking on one of the videos that appear on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to be alerted about new videos. See you next time.